Welcome to CCED Today. We're here at MSU Center for Community and Economic Development. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jennifer Bruin, and I will be interviewing Bill Stow and Terry Link. Hi guys, how are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Good to see you here. I'd like to talk to you, Terry, first about some of your background. I find it interesting. You were or are a sustainability consultant?
Yes.
Okay, and you have your own firm starting now?
Yes,
okay.
As opposed to starting yesterday.
Yeah, okay. You help small businesses, nonprofits, etc., government agencies. Okay.
Cooperatives.
And you've been the executive director in the past for the Lansing Food Bank?
Greater Lansing Food Bank, yes.
Okay. And you were also a director at MSU for the Office of Campus Sustainability?
Yeah, I was the founding director.
Okay. And nearly 25 years as an academic librarian.
That's a career that got me started in all of this, yes.
Yeah, very long time to be a librarian. Very knowledgeable in lots of topics, I'm sure.
I make it up.
Yeah, all right. And then Bill, you also have your own firm, right?
I do, yes.
Okay, Sustainable Research Group?
Correct.
Okay, and it's also in sustainability, design, management services. Maybe you could tell me a little bit more about that one. I'm not as familiar.
Yeah, it is a consultancy that works with businesses, institutions such as educational or hospitals, and nonprofit organizations. A little bit of work with municipalities. Been in business since 2001 under that name, and so have had a lot of experience and interaction with companies seeking a more sustainable path.
And both of you have worked with communities quite a bit.
Yes.
And that's sort of a big focus for this show and for our audience. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to add to your backgrounds that maybe we should know ahead of time, or anything that would help us to understand why you might have decided to work on this particular research project?
Well, for me, I think I don't know if it's different than others, but I still remain hopeful despite all the negative possibilities out there. I believe that there are positive possibilities, which is why I think I've been drawn to sustainability as an approach to community development, and because I think it's real easy to kind of just say, throw your hands up in the air sometimes and just give up. So I believe in possibilities.
One of the things that got me started in this line of work was trying to figure out how sustainable development would apply to the business sector. And early on, one of the things that I found was a network of businesses that rallied around the sustainable business issue. So the West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum has been the most successful model, and they've been going now for over 20 years, meeting monthly, and I think in the Western Michigan area they have about 130 members now. And I've done that in a series of other communities as well. None of them have been quite as successful as the West Michigan, but a few others.
Okay. So you're going to talk today about triple bottom line. This was a topic that we identified as our center with our network, that it's very much on the minds of the state of Michigan as a whole. I think a lot of communities are beginning to talk about this. So it was rated very highly at our summit, and then we found the two of you to work on sort of understanding it better. And you're doing this research project in about a 6-month period, and I think you've titled it Policies and Practices to Support Triple Bottom Line Development. At least that's the title for now, and I know it's not complete. We're really looking forward to September at the summit, where we get to learn about all of the work that you've done. I know that you've conducted a lot of interviews, traveling, and doing a lot of homework. I think you've even left the state. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to your co-learning plan and your presentation on September 10th. But today, do you think you could just start off by talking about triple bottom line and what that really means? I think that a lot of us are still trying to wrap our heads around how does business work with environment, people. And I don't even want to use all the little I heard Terry mention earlier, there's a variety of ways of saying triple bottom line. Was it head, heart, hand, something like this? So you can tell me maybe the background on that, on where it comes from.
Bill, you want to take this one first?
I'll start. Well, in the early evolving of sustainable business practices, it was very hard for a business owner to understand what triple bottom or what sustainability meant. Mm-hmm. So the term triple bottom line was coined essentially to transfer the message to a business owner or someone that wanted to start a business that it's more than just the financial bottom line that's important to businesses in the future, that you also have to look at the environmental impact of your business decisions and the social equity component of your business decisions. So it's like a three-legged stool. If you're going to practice sustainability in your business, then you have to look at all three simultaneously. If you miss one of them, the stool topples. So it's an approach that provides some definition of the kind of discipline you need to keep on the right path.
And I think another component of triple bottom line, which in my mind is still a little too narrow, a way of thinking about how everything fits together. The outcomes that we're really looking for is quality of life. We want the quality of life to be better. And there's been an emphasis, many would argue, especially since the early 70s, towards what we would call neoliberalism, which says everything should be driven by the market, everything has a cost and a price. If we just let that work out, everybody will do better through a trickle-down kind of approach. Mm. But the mentality in all of that is around the economic sphere only, and a hierarchy. Sustainability people see the three spheres being balanced, and thus a triple bottom line. But also there are some who believe more deeply that actually the economic and the social are wholly owned subsidiaries of the environmental. So if you don't protect the environment that provides us with the basics of life, the other parts are inconsequential, because you won't have a society. If you don't have a society, you don't need an economy. We've gotten that kind of distorted. And so this becomes a kind of callback to the real quality of life in a partnership with the living systems that we're part of. And that orientation, as we found when we did the interviews of the leaders of the enterprises that we have interviewed so far, drives them. And there's benefit to that, both to the normal bottom line, where we look at the profit loss in terms of dollars and cents, but beyond that, to the community, mm-hmm. to the workers, to the employees, to the environment. And that's really at the core of what
Don't most businesses care about their employees and care about the environment? I mean, or is it really single bottom line profit most of the time?
They all care. I think that would be, most all of them care. But what gets measured gets managed. So the driving force in the past, as Terry said, has been the economic sphere, and the invisible hand drives everything. And the paradigm shift that has come about as a result of this triple bottom line mentality is that it's not the economy that drives everything, it's actually the ecosphere, the biosphere. Without a healthy biosphere, no business can exist. No one can be happy in their homes and families if they don't have sufficient shelter and food and water and all the necessities. So it's really getting to this point where it says we need to pay more attention to how our business enterprise affects the health of the biosphere, and then we need to measure how well we're doing in that.
And I think another response to your question, based again on the interviews that we've just had with enterprise leaders in the state, there's a relatively recent study out of the Harvard Business Review by MIT professor of business Zeynep Tan that identifies that those companies that are more employee oriented have a better profit line. Because you get your employees to stay there longer, they're better trained, they're happier, and the knowledge that they acquire from being long-term employees helps benefit the organization. And we found, for example, in some of the data that we collect, that every single entity that we looked at had a higher than minimum wage, and that at the ratio from, because we asked about wage ratios from the lowest paid to the highest paid in the company, the highest was 4.5 to 1. It wasn't 373 to 1, which is what the corporate 500 ratios are, but it was much more realistic that they're sharing the wealth, whether they're doing that as a cooperative where workers cooperative where everybody owns and gets it back, or even just a leader, single entity decides that they're going to share the benefit with the employees. And so I think there's been this driving thing that, if our highest cost is labor cost, if we can minimize labor cost, whether it's through technology or through just paying them less, then we'll be more profitable. There's a blowback to that when you have high unemployment and you have people who are basically have no hope for employment whatsoever. So some of the cutting edge things that we're seeing are around targeting employment to those people who don't have employment. That builds the community resources and makes it more stable. But I'm getting off.
Well, you're
ahead
sort
the
of
game.
talking about eliminating unions in some ways, right? Or where the company wouldn't need a union, they would just have a conscience and make decisions that would be similar to what a union has always strived for in some of the bigger companies anyway.
Well, in an employee-owned company, actually, the company is the union in a sense.
Yeah.
But obviously, there's a spectrum there, and I don't think anybody's suggesting you should have only one type of business enterprise. In our study, we purposely chose companies that were employee-owned. We had a co-op. We had a couple of nonprofits. So social enterprise is part of this too. And I think a piece that's missing as we talk about economic development people, they don't necessarily look at those components as targets for growth and development within a community. But they're also the ones least likely to leave because they're committed to that area.
And I think in an ideal world, unions wouldn't be needed.
That's what I'm thinking.
And if you look at the history of the union movement, it only arose because of the poor treatment that workers have received. So if some attention can be brought to how companies can be more respectful and understanding of worker needs and all stakeholder needs, then I think there will be less need for unions.
So in some ways, you're appealing to the more conservative conversation about we don't need unions. I mean, really. And you're also talking about being environmentally conscious, which would, and I think Bill and I talked about this earlier, is that energy, if you're able to conserve energy and save money, then that's also appealing to sort of the right side of the argument.
Right, it's an efficiency argument. A lot of times companies get caught up in, personal commitments about the philosophy of climate change or something like that. Greenhouse gas is only generated from energy production of some kind. Something has to burn. And if you're using less energy to do whatever you need to do, you're therefore generating less greenhouse gas. So the argument is, why not be more efficient? Whether you believe in climate change or not, there's nothing wrong with being more efficient. At the same time, you're generating less greenhouse gas.
Some people watching this would say, these guys are way out.
Freaky.
Yeah, and the liberal conversation is too far-fetched. It's too idealistic. It doesn't make sense for growth and job creation. And could you maybe talk a little bit about why we can't really continue on the path that we are on? I mean, I know that Terry has alluded to that in other conversations and some of his work and previous work.
Well, I think there's in my mind currently, there are two main drivers that should have us question the track that we've been on. One, can you continue to have infinite growth on a finite planet? I mean, the thermodynamics of that issue would suggest clearly not. Yet we have a business model or an economic model, an economic system that believes growth at all costs. That's fine. The other track that's paralleling to that is the incredibly growing inequality, both domestically and internationally. Now, if you keep those trajectories going, the world looks pretty darn dismal. So, typical solution-oriented things is to fix one of those. But triple bottom line is asking us, how can we fix them both at the same time? So then you end up designing something that looks different than just trying to fix climate change. If you're trying to fix climate change, for example, you might do this, that, and the other thing. If you're trying to fix climate change and reduce income inequality both locally and domestically and improve the quality of life, then your solutions look different. So that's when you bring more people to the table because the issues are more complicated. You need more brains to think about. So a lot of the research that we've seen and what we've learned from people is collaboration, crucial. And collaboration doesn't preclude some level of competition. But competition, uber alles, is a dead-end game if we're looking at this finite planet and this growing inequality and trying to fix it. Okay. And so I think this whole orientation towards collaboration to solutions that are more complex, that involve multiple sectors, private sector, public sector, nonprofits, civil society, I think are crucial as community development incubators.
So how would one decide to be triple bottom line? What are some of the maybe corporate designations that would help them with that? Are there any?
There are a number of programs out there. What we're finding, though, is about half of the companies do it organically. They didn't do it. They didn't start out to be triple bottom line. That was just their beliefs, their personal beliefs, and later on it kind of fit the mold of the triple bottom line. Mm-hmm. And then there are other companies that purposefully, right from the very beginning, said we're going to operate as a triple bottom line business. And I think a lot of research that's going on out there today shows that upcoming workers and customers are becoming more concerned about working at companies that have a purpose beyond just profit. You know, they want to know that when they get up in the morning, they go to work, that there's real meaning in that. It's adding value, it's adding quality to their lives and to the communities that they work for and for the stakeholders, that customers and so forth, that service that business. So triple bottom line companies are on the cutting edge of this, I think, what is a shift in mentality of what's going on in the demographics of the world.
So they're paying attention to what the customer wants.
Yeah, well, three of the enterprises that we use the word enterprise because we did more than companies. We did nonprofits, we did co-ops, and we did typical businesses. But three of the enterprises that we interviewed are certified B corporations. And so this is a quickly growing emphasis on companies whose purpose is at least partially social, and it's in their charter to do so. And there's now a performance set of measures that one can go through, a company can go through, to be certified. You have to get a certain number of points in this certification process by things that you do on the environmental side, the social side, and the economic side. And so that becomes, for some, a useful approach to do the measurements if they have that orientation in the first place. And of course, if you are a certified B corporation, you can put that on all your stuff, and it becomes a marketing opportunity, again, going towards especially the younger folks who are looking for companies that are committed to more than just making money.
Does the state of Michigan offer this as a legal designation, or is this similar to maybe a LEED U.S. Green Building Council certification? I mean, can you explain?
It can be kind of like a LEED certification. I don't think the state of Michigan has actually approved the B Corp legislation. And the reason for that legislation is that if you get a standard incorporation bylaws, in many cases, depending on the state that you're in, it makes it essentially illegal to not give maximum return to investors. So if you invest in the community and a shareholder, and I'll say shareholder purposefully here, says that you're wasting the corporation's money, that could have been a dividend. Even though there may be a long-term great reason to invest in the community, they might win a successful lawsuit against the management of the company. The B Corp legislation allows that structure to say that no, the management has the flexibility to make those kinds of decisions if they feel like it will benefit the community or stakeholders that long-term will help the company. And it's a growing movement across the United States. I think there are about 2,000 companies in the U.S. right now that have adopted these B Corp standards.
Thriving
And
under
it's
that
a pretty
designation.
thorough assessment. I've looked at the assessment list that they go through. It's very thorough. And so, to score points and get up there means that you're really making some effort to do that consciously. And it'll be interesting to see, since B corporations are relatively new on the scene, how they do in comparison to others in the same sectors that they're operating in. And time will tell on that, but the early evidence is, based on the growth that we're seeing and the ones that we interviewed, very well.
Yeah. So we're currently in Michigan all about jobs, jobs, jobs. And we have been, because the recession hit us so hard. I think we're the only state that lost population. I keep saying this over and over again when I travel. It's hard for, I think, other states to understand the depths that we're coming out of, but all over the newspaper we're hearing about how Michigan has the comeback state and we're doing great. Seems like this is a good opportunity for us to begin to think differently in this way, rather than only those big companies that we all know, the auto industry. So how do we begin to help economic developers in small towns, big cities, to kind of begin to understand this, think about it, and really maybe incentivize companies in their community, or help them to grow companies in their community that would embrace this? How do we do that?
This is one of the surprising things about the research that we've done so far, is that the 13 companies that or enterprises that we've interviewed, the vast majority of them had no incentives, no help from economic development organizations whatsoever.
Wow.
It was like, I was expecting more, but they're generally self-financed, they're purposely driven by their own passion, and they've been successful in spite of no help. Even once they're up and running, the survey results are showing that there are very few incentive programs by the economic development organizations to help them flourish.
One of the interviews that we did out of state was with this effort in Cleveland. It's called the Evergreen Cooperatives. And this gives an example to your question about jobs. So the purpose on this was to create jobs in distressed communities. So people who really don't appear to have any future because they have low skills, and yet have wages that pay well. So then the cooperative is a good idea for that, because all the incomes generated is shared. And so it's a motivation to work harder, because you're going to reap a share of those profits at the same time. And so there was this collaboration that was stimulated by the Democracy Collaborative among the anchor institutions, which is a really interesting model of local community development. Anchor institutions, by the nature of anchor, not that sinks to the bottom, but those that are not going to move. What are those institutions in any community that aren't going to move? Well, they're your schools and colleges. They're your hospitals. They don't pick up and move. They're your local government. Those anchor institutions have an enormous purchasing power. Could we bring those anchor institutions collaboratively together to purposefully look to purchase more stuff locally? And especially, in the example of the Evergreen Cooperatives, they looked at, okay, what do these kinds of anchor institutions need that we could do here? One was laundry. Think of hospitals. Think of all kinds of things that go on at schools where there's laundry. So they created a commercial laundry in a distressed neighborhood that had no real strong economic thing, with residents who were unemployed, including people returning from prison, who have the black mark against them, who can't otherwise find work. And they are showing success. They're on their own at this point, and they've now created two other spin-offs, one dealing with energy and energy innovation, and another with aquaponics, growing salad greens and other things in a 12-month-a-year, 3.5-acre greenhouse. You need startup funds to make this happen, of course. But this is where the anchor institutions come in, because they, like in the CSA, community-supported agriculture, you buy in advance. And so this long-term commitment, this is true in fair trade, there's a commitment of a long-term relationship, a level of trust that gets built. And it's this kind of stuff in a marketplace where anybody can pick up and move, and things aren't going like they wanted to. People that are rooted in place are going to stick it out and work it out. And I think there's a lot of potential in every community in the state to build and create jobs that are good paying jobs that are going to stay in the community. And if that emphasis is on those things at the same time, then those jobs look different, other than just bringing in fast food or other kinds of things where, you know, if it's not making enough profit, the franchise gets sold or the corporate takes their headquarters out. And, you know, that kind of thing.
It was really inspirational to talk to some of the workers in the cooperative who, many of whom had been languishing without any kind of stability in their lives, and then all of a sudden enter into this world of cooperatives where they become company owners. And they help direct the future of the company. They're invested in it, and you can see the pride. You can see the pride in them as they talk about what they're doing and what their future looks like. It's pretty amazing. Getting back to the economic development issues, one of the things that came out clearly in most of the companies that we interviewed, they have a passion to invest in renewable energy. They want access to more sustainable energy sources. And almost to an organization, they were saying that it's really hard for them to make that happen. Local governments, state governments, national governments all have restrictive policies that are making it very difficult for them to follow their passions in the energy sourcing. You also saw a lot of organizations saying the economic developers could do more in just getting the workforce more prepared for us to hire them. I mean, right now they have to bring people into their companies and do all the training themselves, and there could be a lot more work done up front by economic development organizations to make sure the workforce is ready.
That's interesting. I'm just thinking that maybe somewhere down the line here that you didn't interview companies that are resistant to these ideas.
Right.
No.
So maybe in the future we might want to think about a co-learning plan that would also kind of get at that, or maybe post your co-learning plan, we spend some time to maybe talk to them about where are the barriers with them, why is it that they are not moving in this direction, because you've explained that it'll save them money, it'll keep their employees' retention much better off, the community will be happy because they stay. It just seems like we need to find out maybe also why the typical corporation, not the B Corp, not the shared type of economy company, why they are not moving in this direction.
This is just postulation on my part, and I'd be interested in Terry's response to this too. But I think one of the reasons is that there's a certain limit to growth of these TBL companies. I'll take one company that I interviewed that they make locally produced jams and jellies, the highest quality. There is no way that they can continually expand to a global presence and keep the quality and their values intact. They realize that, and so there is a built-in resistance to growing too fast, or to growing faster than the resources that can supply your business will provide, at least in that case. Most of the resistance that I see comes from companies that, their primary interest is being able to scale globally and to maximize profit. And those are the two major components. And that is the antithesis of the triple bottom line companies. They want to have high quality, well-paying jobs, but they're not interested in maximizing profit at the cost of everything else.
So if these companies don't get on board, what's their future look like? I mean, are we talking about those that don't share in that same kind of value system may disappear? Some of them, those companies won't make it if they're not going to consider the ramifications of
Well, I think it's in some sectors where there's a handful of giant players that control so much, they're going to fight it out amongst themselves, and it's the smaller players who will, sustain some things. But, if one looks out, and I think one of the differences, again, Bill asked for how I thought about this. I think one of the biases is short-term thinking versus long-term thinking. If you're a place-based organization and you've lived there or you're going to live there and work there for a long period of time, you want that place to thrive, and you want your family to do well, and your friends of your family to do well, and the school where your kid goes to school to do well. And so you're willing to make some sort of investments in that place, in your enterprise, that if that's not your orientation, if you're about to move to wherever the cheapest deal is, where I can get this cheaper versus another community, whether it's labor cost or environmental regulations that aren't burdensome or whatever it is, it's a totally different orientation. And the old business model was, you cut costs, you buy low and you sell high, that's where the profit margin is, and you think about profit in a narrow sense. And so it's a changing of this orientation about what it is we expect, to get out of whatever it is that we're trying to do.
Okay. Once again, the title of your co-learning plan is Policies and Practices to Support Triple Bottom Line Development. It's staying that title. It may change, but I know a lot of these co-learning plan
we'll
authors.
Think of something more creative later.
Yeah. And you'll have it finished in September, and we'll be sharing it. You'll be at the summit. This has been great to be able to understand it a little bit better, because for the last few months we've talked on occasion, but nobody has seen your work yet, and all of these interviews, I'm sure that the interviewees are going to be interested in reading your co-learning plan. Do you have any final thoughts about, because mostly this is to help communities, not so much just businesses, but do you have any final thoughts for communities and how they can maybe have an environment that would be warm and receptive to this? When they pick up your co-learning plan, they want to be able to walk away and say, we want to do this in our community. What would be their first step or their first thing that they might want to do to get ready?
I would say, and this is something that's come out of the research, I didn't realize this until we started doing this, and that is economic development organizations has to become aware that this is a growing phenomenon, and that there are businesses right now in their communities that are looking at these principles and starting to follow them. They're totally unrecognized. They're not recognized by the economic development organizations, and they're missing a lot of potential to foster that component of the community. I don't suggest that they turn away from all the other activities they're doing, but right now they're missing a growing and significant part of their future.
So recognition, maybe a little bit of education.
Yes.
And I think a key point that I've pulled out of this is the nature and the power of collaboration. And I think the economic development drivers in this community, if they expand their notion of development beyond economic, and they think about collaboration not only in terms of just for-profit businesses, so that they're bringing in the community foundations, the anchor institutions, which might be nonprofits, and the civil society, nonprofit, social enterprise people together. What is it we need in the community? How can we help each other? So the concept of the import substitution, where are we sending our money out of this community that we could do it ourselves if we put our things together and we agreed, to support each other in doing that? There's so much positive energy in the people that we interview, both the ones that are running enterprises here and the few of the nationally recognized experts in some of this area. So much good energy and stuff going on all over the country, all over the world, usually started by a handful of crazy people who think, we can do better than this. And they think up something, they try it, it tends to catch on, and then there's this energy that evolves out of that. And I think that energy is transferable. So as people read our report or hear us at the Innovate Michigan, hopefully we'll able to give them enough examples to say, wow, let's go look at what Richmond is doing right now. Let's go look at what Madison is doing right now, or Austin, or Seattle, or Des Moines, Iowa, or wherever those communities are where there's experiences of people trying new things and generating a lot of good quality of life experience for the community.
There's actually one model that we haven't really talked about a lot, but economic development officials could look at an experiment going on right now in Oberlin, Ohio. That was one of the communities that Terry and I traveled to, and they are really scaling up the sustainable communities to incorporate all the things that we've talked about in this interview, and that Terry just iterated in terms of collaboration. They've got a comprehensive plan for the community. They want to be the nation's first sustainable city.
Wow. Yeah, impressive. Okay, so that seems like all the time we have today. And I'd like to thank the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration for providing financial support for this program. And thank you both for coming. It's a pleasure to have you.
You're welcome, and thank you for having us.
For more information on this co-learning plan or on the REI University Center, please visit reicenter.org. Thank you for watching CCED today.